Hey everyone, I'm Bhavin, the CEO of Magoosh, and I'm here with Wesley Bosco, who has graciously offered his time to share his experience taking the at-home GMAT. So thanks for joining, Wesley.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, so to get started, I'd love for you to share why you decided to take the GMAT. What are your aspirations? Where do you want to go to school and all of that?
Yeah, so I am going to Bain & Company as an associate consultant this fall, and that seems to be a typical path to go to business school. But I still wasn't sure if I wanted to do private equity or business school, and I had some time on my hands. I just barely graduated in April and had a few classes, so I figured it would be a good time to study for the GMAT and to have a score that I could use 3 to 5 years down the road. So that's the main reason why, just to get ahead and to apply to some early deferment programs.
Wow, that's incredible. I normally meet people who are taking their GMAT maybe 1 to 2 years out, and you're taking advantage of the max time. 5 years is how long a score is valid. So that brings me to my next question, which is why did you decide to then, given that you had so much time, take the GMAT when it's at home instead of waiting until maybe you could take it at a test center again?
My goal was to get it done before I started at Bain & Company because I knew that would be time consuming. And so I started back in December studying for it. And I took it my first time the end of January, and I wasn't really happy with my score. So my goal was to take it in the middle of March. I had my first baby boy the beginning of March, and so I had to push that back a few weeks, and I did it for March 23rd, I think was my test date. And then I believe it was March 16th when the testing centers were closed. By then I had already studied for so long and so many months, I felt like I would be at a disadvantage waiting for the test centers to open, mostly because I didn't know when they would. So as soon as I saw the opportunity to take it online, I had to, weigh the odds. Should I wait it out? Should I just go for it online? Because there were some major disadvantages for the online version, and I'm sure we'll talk about those that I felt at least at the beginning. But I decided to move forward and take it because I didn't want to keep studying. I wanted to get it over with.
That's incredible. So you took the test in a test center, then you had a kid, then you studied both in the midst of having a kid and a global pandemic, and then decided to take it. It's quite the story. I have 2 kids at home, now, and I can only imagine what it was like going through that. But you shared that, so you did take the test once and you didn't do as well as you'd like. Could you share more about sort of how you did and then what your target was?
Yeah, when I first took it, I studied for about 2 weeks, but I had never even seen a GMAT question before. I just studied for 2 weeks, about 3 to 4 hours a day, and I got a 640, which I was happy with because I hadn't studied for very long. I had a 30, I think, on verbal and a 47 on quant. So I figured if I could just get my verbal up and I can get to the 700 range, I'll be in good shape. So that's why I decided to take it again. And I saw the Magoosh 50-point guarantee, and I thought, well, there's really no risk there. I might as well go for it. And I have some more time on my hands. I might as well keep studying and go for it again.
Great. And we'll get back to how you did on your second test in a bit. And you're right, we do have that 50-point guarantee. So we'll see, stay tuned to see if we're giving you a refund or not. But let's talk about the experience of sort of registering for that online test. How did that, was it easy to register? Did it feel complicated, especially since you went through the regular registration process the first go round?
Registering was super simple. It's through the MBA website, so nothing really changed. I can't remember exactly, but I think it sends you to a new browser, a Pearson browser, and it gives you options to take the test. What's nice about the online version is that every day is open. I don't know if Sundays are, but I think every day of the week is open, and there are time slots every 15 minutes. When it first opened up, those filled up really quickly, but I took it the second week the online version was out, and you can basically take it whenever you want, which is super nice, because part of the reason I didn't like going to the testing center was, for me, it was about a 30 to 45 minute drive, super anxious, super stressed. I liked being able to just go to my kitchen table when I was ready and take it right away. So I didn't have to, dwell in all those anxious feelings. For that reason, it was nice. As far as registering, I just clicked on a time slot, and it was super simple to do. It made sure that I had all the requirements for my computer, and I just followed the instructions. It tells you to, I don't know if I could go into details now, but it wants to make sure that you have a webcam. I had to get an Ethernet cable for my parents. I didn't have one myself. I just put the computer by the router and plugged that in just so that the connection was secure. And then it just has you take a few pictures. Super simple process. It sends it all to your phone with your driver's license and all that stuff. And it took me about 20 minutes, and I was all ready and registered for the exam.
That's incredible. That sounds, easy, and you also didn't have to drive to the test center, like you said, and deal with the anxiety of parking and whatnot. So let's get into some of those details. So you had a webcam. Was your webcam on your laptop, or was it an external webcam?
Mine was on my laptop. I don't know the exact details on an external webcam, but I believe that works as well.
Yeah, and then did you have to pick up the laptop and show the room or anything, or when it started, what did you have to show that was in the room?
So when I was registering for the test, it sends you to your phone a link that takes you to a website where it tells you to take the picture of your driver's license, the front and back, and then it has you take every angle of where you're going to take the test. So it tells you to be in the location you're going to actually take the test in, and then take a front, back, left, and right picture with nothing obviously around you to show that that's where you'll be taking the test. And so when the test day comes, you do the same process again, except you don't need to do it with your driver's license, and you need to just make sure you're in the same location. So it's pretty simple.
Okay. And were you using a Windows machine or a Mac machine?
I was using a Windows, and it's a pretty old computer. It's probably, I don't know the exact year, but I'd say it's 5 years-ish old.
And you had mentioned you had to plug in an Ethernet cable. And I'm curious, was that a requirement that, the GMAT said, hey, you need to have a wired connection, or were you doing it just to make sure that you had a really strong connection?
It recommends that you use an Ethernet cable. And so I knew my parents had one, so I just used it. I don't think it's a requirement, but I'm one of those people who stress out a lot, and I would be worried that maybe the Wi-Fi would get disconnected. So I made sure I had one, but I don't think it's an absolute requirement.
Yeah, and I totally understand the notion of getting stressed out and wanting to be plugged in so the Wi-Fi doesn't drop. And you're right. So we'll link to some articles below which say what all the requirements are. So, for folks who are interested. I was pretty sure an Ethernet cable wasn't required, but I wanted to check in since you said you used one, and I understand why you would use one, and I understand why others would use one. I actually don't have one in the house. So if I were taking the GMAT, I'd probably just be as close to the router as possible and really hope things don't go badly. So let's talk about the experience of test day. So you're sitting, you said at your kitchen table. Did you see the proctor's face? Did you chat with them? Like, how did the startup process work? And was there any delay on their end? Were you sitting waiting at all?
It says, so my time was 8:15 in the morning, and it says that you can log in and get ready 30 minutes before. So at 7:45, I was pacing back and forth before then, but at 7:45, I did the registering process, which I mentioned, and it took me 5 minutes. And once that happened, it said, okay, it approved me or whatever the words were, and it let me actually start the test right away. So I think I started the test a little bit before 8 o'clock, and my actual time was 8:15. But that's because I started at 7:45 getting things ready. So you can start right away as long as you begin in that 30-minute window getting things ready. And I would advise to probably start earlier in case there are a few hiccups that you can reach out, that they can reach out to you. Once I started, it launched a browser. It made me go off all of the things I was on. So I had to get out of Chrome and everything I was on in my computer. And then it launched a browser or some sort of download that I had to download previously on my computer. And it looked just like the testing center. And then a little picture of my face popped up in the middle and the center, and that's all I could see. Later, when I was taking the test, they did say something to me and a chat box popped up. But other than that, like when things were going as normal, there were no issues. I just saw a little picture of myself and I couldn't see anybody else.
Okay. And when that chat box popped up, was that during a break or was that in the middle of your test?
It was in the middle of the integrated reasoning section. So I was about 90% of the way done. And it kind of threw me off because it pops up and it says the proctor is typing. And so she wrote out a little message to me and it took like 20 seconds to type, but it popped up right in front of my problem. And it really threw me off a little. So I wasn't a big fan of that, but fortunately it happened at the end of my test. So it wasn't too bad.
Wow. Yeah, I could see how that would completely throw you and throw me. What did that need to happen? Was she sort of sharing something urgent, or was it something that potentially could have waited to the break, just so people know sort of what to expect?
Yeah, I didn't talk out loud. It's a rule not to talk out loud. But there were times when sometimes I like to whisper out loud, to just help me focus on things. And I must have whispered too loudly or something. And she just it was a kind reminder of, hey, I know this is helpful, but could you just make sure you're not talking at all, even if it's a small whisper? And I said, oh yes, for sure. And she said, great, get back to your test. So it was a kind thing. They're not like trying to police you by any means. I probably did speak a little bit too loud and I was trying to go through my problem. But yeah, that's what it was for. And they were kind about it, and I was able to get back to work, and there was no big deal there.
Okay, that's great to know. And I've heard that from other students where they do have a habit of talking out loud while they're solving problems, and you're not allowed to talk out loud. And so I think this is also a good reminder if folks are practicing, maybe you hear yourself talking out loud, you might want to pause because you're not going to do that on test day, or else you'll get a pop-up in the middle of your integrated reasoning section.
Exactly.
And so you mentioned that there are some differences, you having taken it in the test center and then also at home. Two of the most notable ones are there's no writing section and there's an online whiteboard, so you can't use pen and paper or pencil and paper. I'd love to hear your experience, what you thought was positive about the at-home experience in terms of the actual test and what was challenging.
Yeah. So first, positives from the at-home experience. Like I said before, I could dive right into the test. I was able to take several practice tests with the same exact format as I would take the real test, which is really nice because I was in the same place. I felt comfortable and I was able to do well in that sense. It was quicker because there was no writing portion, which is nice. And that's usually, typically only 30 minutes, so it's not long, but it's at the end of the test. And so that was nice that the test itself was a little bit shorter. Some disadvantages from it. When I first saw that you could only use a whiteboard, the online whiteboard marker, I almost just decided not to take the online version because that seems very difficult with the amount that I do write down and how easy it is to write on a computer screen with a mouse, because I'm not sure, but I don't think you can use a stylus. What I ended up doing is I decided to take a practice test with an online sketchpad. This was before they sent out the link that you can actually practice with their version. So I just did an online sketchpad and it was difficult. But what I noticed that my mental math skills, I actually had to force myself to solve more problems in my mind. And I was very strategic in what I wrote out. So in some ways, it actually helped me be quicker. But yeah, you have to get used to it. And then I had to just decide for my verbal section. I typically take notes with the reading comprehension questions. I decided not to take notes because it was just too distracting. The shorthand is difficult to do with a mouse. So I decided to, when I was doing my practice test, to not take any notes with the verbal and to do certain things with the math. So overall, that was probably the most challenging experience. And I just say, take a practice test with the whiteboard and figure out what works for you. But I think overall that it's not too big of a difference. It was much larger than I had previously thought. I mean, it wasn't as big as I had previously thought.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's great advice of take a practice test using
Yeah.
now the online whiteboard that MBA.com has. And how many practice tests did you take with your sketchpad?
I did 3 of them. Typically, I wouldn't do so many in a row, but I wanted to get used to the sketchpad. So I ended up taking a practice test Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday, and I took the real thing Thursday. I wouldn't say take 3 in a row, but for me, it was helpful to just get used to it.
Yeah, wow, it's a lot of tests in a short period of time. But I think these are very unique circumstances with this online whiteboard, and I know it can be stressful for folks. It sounds like it was a good strategy for you. And what did you use to take the practice tests? Did you use the official ones, or did you use other ones from a company?
Yeah, I actually used the Magoosh one on Saturday. I had already gone through most of the problems, but I did a practice test through Magoosh, and then I bought additional official GMAT tests from the MBA website, test 3 and 4, and I took those Monday and Tuesday. And part of taking those tests was to see if I should actually do the online one, and I got good enough scores on that, so I decided to take the real one on Thursday.
No, that's great. And for folks who don't know, their MBA.com offers 2 official practice tests for free, 1 and 2, and then you can buy 3, 4, 5, and 6. So theoretically, you can take 6 practice tests. And then something that we are now doing that, unfortunately, I don't think was around, Wesley, when you were studying with Magoosh, is we actually have a discounted offer on those official practice tests. So if you buy a premium account to Magoosh, you can get the official ones at a little bit of a discount.
Oh, I got that discount.
Oh, you got the discount. Great. Yeah. And for folks who don't know, no company is allowed to use official practice questions. So at Magoosh, we try to make them as similar as we can to the GMAT to give everyone a test-like experience. But really, the best way to take a practice test is through the official practice tests. And so I would highly recommend doing that. So you mentioned that you were a retaker. You scored a 640. Before we get to your score, I'd love to hear how you approach studying differently the second time around.
I think the main thing is time. I gave myself 2 weeks. I had talked to people who did really well on the GMAT, and my expectations were set at, if I study for 2 weeks, I should get a good enough score. For me, that was not enough. What I learned that the time frame is actually super important for your mind to really wrap itself around the different type of GMAT questions and the way you need to think about them. So for me, I needed several months. Some people don't need that, but that was the big difference between the first time I took it and the second time I took it. And I got a little bit more time because of the cancellation of the test and everything. But that ended up being the best thing for me.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I can imagine some people can study in 2 weeks, but for most people, we would recommend trying to study over a course of 3 months. And can you break down how you approach studying in like a week by week basis? Did you have any strategies or tools that you sort of use to like keep yourself on track? And how much did you try to do each day?
Yeah, I had a lot of time on my hands because I only had a few classes left in college. And so when I started studying with Magoosh, I took their 1 month study plan. So let me backtrack a little. The first time I took the test, I did really well on quant and I struggled with verbal. I knew that moving forward, I wanted to spend more time on verbal and still focus on the quant section. So when I started Magoosh, I took the 3 month plan and focusing on verbal, and I mixed it with the 1 month plan, and I just created my own schedule. For me, doing a lot of practice questions is very helpful. It just gets me in the mindset and helps me learn how to solve certain problems. So I went through all of the Magoosh problems, which I think there's over 1,300, 1,400. It's one reason I really liked Magoosh is because there were so many different problems I could go through. And I also, to improve my verbal score, I made sure that I spent time reading every day in the Wall Street Journal or Smithsonian magazine. It's what is recommended on that study journal site that Magoosh has. And then lastly, I went through the idioms, the flashcards. That was super, super helpful for my sentence correction. And I spent 10 to 15 minutes a day on that, 20 minutes reading. And then I went through a lot of practice questions in the lessons each day to take about a month and a half to get through all of them. So I spent about maybe 3 or 4 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Oh yeah, that's commitment, and that's awesome. And we'll link below to, I think, everything you mentioned. So you mentioned our 1 month study plan, or 3 month study plan. They they're accessible on the web for anyone. You do need a Magoosh Premium account to use them. You mentioned our idiom flashcards, which are completely free. So we can link to all of that for folks who are interested. And so okay, so you did all of this practice. You practiced. It sounds like you did every single question that we have to offer. And more. And so how did you do? Did you, are we giving you a refund? Did you see a 50-point score improvement?
Magoosh is not giving me a refund. Yeah, I got a 700, which was, that barrier, that threshold that I really wanted to get to, which I'm really happy about. I was able to improve my verbal score by 4 points and my quant score by 3 points. So I was super happy with the results and grateful for them.
Wow, that's incredible. And it sounds like you had already started at a high quant. I think you said you had 47. If you improved it by 3 points, that's a 50. That's an incredible quant score. And so the online whiteboard seemed to not really hinder you too much. Yeah. And then is there anything else that you think students who are in the midst of this sort of really challenging time and thinking about taking the GMAT at home, is there any other recommendations or thoughts that you want to share with folks who are in that situation?
I think it's a good chance to take it. The online GMAT you can only take once, and you can send it to as many schools as you want for free. They actually let you look at your score and decide later how you want to send where you want to send the score. So it's kind of a nice test. I would say no risk. You can practice from your home just like a practice test. But it is, again, $200, so it's totally up to the individual. But I would say that it's a good idea to take it. I'm not sure when testing centers are open or if they are open, but if you're ready and you feel like you've taken the time to study for the GMAT, you might as well go for it. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah, there you have it. Wesley's view on taking it at home, which it's clearly worked for you, and I can see it working for others. You get to practice in your house exactly where you're going to take it. You don't have to deal with parking or the anxiety of travel, or what if there's traffic or anything like that. And the online whiteboard is a challenge, but it sounds like one that you can get comfortable with. Yeah, really appreciate you sort of taking the time and sharing your story. And there's so many people sort of going through this like incredibly challenging time, and tests just add more stress to a stressful situation. So I think hopefully this will make it a little easier for other folks. So really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And then for anyone who's watching this who is interested in using Magoosh's premium GMAT account, we're offering a 20% discount if you use the code @HOME-GMAT. So ATHOME GMAT, no spaces. And we offer to the first 100 folks, and then that will be it. All right. Thanks, everyone.